And this is the final video that's going to be in the Excel Unit A, which is where we're going to be choosing some print options. And always, before printing a document, you want to review it using the Page Layout tab. And you also want to print preview to fine-tune your printed document, because this is going to save you ink and this is going to save you paper. It tells us that you should also review your settings in the print dialog box to make sure you are printing the desired number of copies and using the correct printer. Tools on the Page Layout tab include a page setup group where you can adjust print orientation, the direction in which the content prints across the page, the paper size, and page breaks. There's also a Scale to Fit group, which makes it possible to fit a large amount of data on a single page without making changes to the individual margins. In the Sheet Options group, you can turn on and off the grid lines and the column and row headings. And of course, reviewing your final worksheet in the print preview shows exactly what your worksheet will look like when it's printed. On step 1 on page Excel 16, we're going to be clicking on cell A21. So we're going to go all the way down here at the very bottom. And it tells us that we're going to type in your name. So here I am typing in my name, and I'm going to press enter. Next, on step 2, it tells me that I want to click the Page Layout tab on the ribbon. So here we go, we're going to use a new tab, and that's our Page Layout tab. Looks very similar to the Word tab, with some exceptions on there. And of course, remember, this dotted line is going to indicate the print area to be printed. So if I would type something out here, that's not going to be in my print area. Only the things that are included in the dotted line here is going to be printed. On step 3, it tells me that I want to click on the orientation button. And that's in the page setup group. When I click on that, we have our two options, portrait and landscape. Remember that portrait is taller than it is wide, and landscape is wider than it is tall. So we click on landscape here, and notice our piece of paper that we are looking at, our digital paper that we're looking at here, has changed so that the contents will print across the length of the page instead of across the width. Now you can also use the zoom slider at any time to enlarge your view of specific areas of your worksheet. And that's down here, and that's very much similar to what we used in Word. Step 4 tells us that we're going to click back on the orientation button again, and we're going to switch it to portrait on there. And of course, this will return it to the portrait, so the contents will print across the width of the page and not the height. Step 5 tells us that we are going to click the Gridlines View text box, and that is in the Sheet Options group on the Page Layout tab. So we're on the Page Layout tab here, and here we have our sheet options. And of course, notice right now that we have the grid lines and the headings. And this is going to allow us to either view them or print them. So notice if I click on view here, the grid lines disappear. Same thing with the headings. That can disappear. So if those are turned off, you probably want to leave those on at most times. But once we have that, we're going to click on the Gridlines View checkbox on the Page Layout tab. So once we do that, we're going to remove the grid lines. Next, we're going to click on the Print Grid Lines checkbox to select it if it's necessary. We want to make sure that it is selected. And of course, when you print the grid lines, it makes the data easier to read, but the grid lines on there will not print unless this checkbox is print. So while you're working, it's easier to take a look at the grid lines this way so you know where the cells are at. But when you turn this button here off, you see how it's going to print unless this print button is selected. And to show you how that works is that we can go up here to our Office button, and this is on step 6 on page Excel 16, and we're going to go to Print, and we're going to take a look at Print Preview. Notice that even though in our main view the grid lines were not shown, but where we had the print grid lines on, notice that here is the grid lines. They will print. Whatever this document looks like right here, or this spreadsheet looks like here, is exactly what it's going to look like when you print it. Now, if you would like to take a closer look at this, you can always use the zoom tool here in the zoom group. And when you click on it, it zooms in, so you can take a look at your document and say, hey, this spreadsheet, that either looks good or lets you know if you need to make some changes. But however, you cannot make changes at this point in time in the print preview in Excel. The next thing we're going to do here is that we're going to click on this print button. Now, we won't actually print this document, but we'll take a look at this options right here. Of course, on here we can take a look, and this will allow you to select your printer. Notice I have some different printers here. You want to make sure that the correct one is selected, which for you should be the Lexmark Network printer or the 218 T644. We also see our print range here, and we're going to ultimately want it to say all. Now, if you go back to the View tab on here and take a look at the breaks view, you can see how many pages are there, and you can say if you want to print page 1, page 2, or whatever. Over here you see that we have the number of copies, and of course, in this case, most of the time you'll print one copy. But if you need to print multiple copies, you can use the up and down arrows to select how many copies you'd like. Now, there is a button here called the collate button, and what that collate button is it's going to collate the papers. So you notice here that on the first copy it would be 1, 2, 3, and then on the second copy it would be 1, 2, 3. However, if we uncheck that box, it's going to print all the page 1s first, then all the page 2s second, and then all the page 3s third. So that's an important button to take a look at and to usually make sure that it's checked. That way, so when you take it off the printer, that they're all put together and they're already grouped up. The last little area that we're going to take a look at here is the print what. And this shows us that we can either print just a selection, we can print the entire workbook, which would be all the sheets that have information, or we can just print the active sheet that is here. Now, of course, you can click ignore print areas and it would print the entire page here, but we're not going to do that because we are going to now take this document or this spreadsheet and we're going to upload this to Core Sites. So from this area here, you can just click on cancel. Just make sure that your name is on it, and you can save your spreadsheet, and then you can go ahead and close it down and submit it to Core Sites. Now, we did mention one thing on here that is very important, where it talks about scaling to fit. And this is if you have a large amount of data that you want to fit onto a single sheet of paper, because sometimes you may have an extra column or two that is over in this area that you want really to fit in one page. And you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to adjust the margins or trying to adjust the column width and everything else. So that's where you're going to use the Fit To option in the Page Setup dialog box. So notice here that we have Scale to Fit, but that's not what we're wanting to use. To open up the Page Setup dialog box, we just need to click on the launcher here for the Page Setup group. And when we do that, notice that we have the scaling here. And the scaling is going to allow us to tell us that if we want it at 100% of its normal size, or we want to fit it to a certain number of pages. So we can print this to 1 page wide by 1 page tall. And of course, you want to make sure that the page tab is selected. That's the page tab right here. You want to make sure that one's selected. Then when you choose this Fit To, you can tell how many pages that you would like to have it to fit onto. And when you're ready to print, you could just go ahead and click on this print button, which will take you back to the print dialog box. Now, a little bit of warning of this Page Setup Fit To. If you have an incredibly large amount of data, and let's assume that it is 5 or 6 pages or more wide and tall, then what you're going to, if you try to do this, it will make the text on here smaller. So you may actually get it to be to a point of where you can't read it. So generally, you'll probably want to go through and make sure you do a print preview before printing it. And that concludes this series of video over Excel A. You may now move on to the next task, and you can take a look at Core Sites to complete that.